The entire room fell into silence as Malcolm Reed rose from his seat. His maintenance uniform a sharp contrast to the tailored suits surrounding him. His heart thundered in his chest. "Do not approve the $4.2 billion agreement," he declared, louder than he had meant. Outside, flashes lit up the windows. The press was already in position for what they expected to be a historic corporate milestone. Janelle Carter, 35-year-old CEO of Carter Dynamics, locked eyes with him. Her hand, holding a sleek pen, hovered just above the signature line. Security began moving in his direction. Everything was on the line, especially the future of his little girl. Once a promising investment banker, Malcolm now scrubbed floors in silence, and he had mere seconds before being forcibly removed. Janelle lifted her hand, halting security. "Everyone, out," she said firmly. "Except him. Have you ever experienced something like this? Let us know in the comments, and where you're watching from." The night before, Malcolm Reed quietly made his rounds through the top floor of Carter Dynamics, emptying trash cans as he had done night after night for nearly 2 years. After hours, these high-powered corridors felt different, free from polished smiles, handshakes dripping with calculation, and the tension of ambition that he liked it better this way. At least the silence didn't lie that he slowed as he neared the main boardroom. The light inside was still on. Nearly everyone had gone home hours ago, but through the frosted glass, he saw a single silhouette that he knew immediately who it was. Janelle Carter. The brilliant but unrelenting Soho had inherited the company at just 30. People in the break room gossiped often about her iron will and sharp mind. Malcolm usually kept quiet. He'd learned that invisibility was the best form of self-protection. That he watched her for a moment, shoulders hunched, eyebrows drawn in focus, strangely reminding him of his daughter Kyra when she struggled through her math homework. The image jolted him back. Kiera was waiting for him at Ms. Holloway's apartment. He glanced at his watch. He had to finish and pick her up before 10. Malcolm pushed his cleaning cart forward, planning to skip the boardroom and return once it was empty, but a loud shuffle broke his thoughts. A pile of documents fell to the floor, followed by a heavy sigh. Old instincts kicked in. He knocked lightly. "Excuse me, ma'am. Would you like me to return later?" She looked up, startled, as though reminded that someone else still existed in the building. "No, it's all right. Come in," she replied, her voice edged with the sharpness of someone interrupted mid-flowed. As he stepped in, she began gathering her pages quickly, dropping more in the rush. He crouched to help, his hands brushing against loose papers. That's when he noticed it. A spreadsheet with bold highlights listing staffing numbers across departments. One section stood out, labeled Post-Merger Downsizing. Cold, red figures marked thousands of job cuts, including every single janitorial position in the Detroit branch. Malcolm's eyes froze on a code he knew all too well. His department. His grip tightened around the sheet of paper as his mind flashed to the stack of medical bills waiting back home on his kitchen table. The final warning on his rent. The prescription for Kiera's insulin due to be refilled next week. The fragile balance he had rebuilt after losing it all was now teetering again. "Thanks," Janelle said, reaching to retrieve the scattered pages. But Malcolm didn't move. His gaze remained locked on the document. She noticed, following his line of sight. Realization flickered across her features. "That's restricted information," she said sharply, her voice growing cold. "Of course, sorry," Malcolm answered, handing the pages back with the carefully neutral expression had learned to wear during the worst days of his downfall 3 years earlier. He turned to go, but her voice caught him mid-step. "You're Malcolm, right? Night crew." He hesitated, surprised she knew his name. "Yes, ma'am." She studied him briefly, then gave a curt nod. "All right, good night." Have you ever been in a moment where staying silent felt like betrayal? Tell us where you're from, because your story matters too. Malcolm finished the rest of his shift in a haze of movement, his mind spiraling with thought. By sunrise, his decision was made that IT was no longer just about his job. It was about all the people who would be discarded for profit. While executives cashed their bonuses, sometimes you had to take a stand, even if it meant risking the little you had left. There was one thing Malcolm Reed still carried from his old finance career: a deep understanding of how deals like this really operated and who paid the hidden price. The morning of the contract signing arrived like a spectacle. Media lined the street. Security swarmed the building. But no one questioned the janitor entering through the rear service door. In the quiet of the locker room, Malcolm changed into his uniform, his fingers trembling slightly as he buttoned his shirt, in his pocket. He held a printed list of employees there. Names, years of loyalty, medical conditions, family situations. The human faces behind the spreadsheet numbers. Would someone like Janelle Carter even care? Probably not. But he had to try. For Kiera, for himself, for the part of him that had died when he chose silence once before. He entered the boardroom 5 minutes before the ceremony. N01 looked up. The blessing and curse of being unseen. He positioned himself quietly by the water dispenser, watching executives shake hands, self-congratulations. Echoing beneath the glitter of camera flashes, Janelle sat at the head of the table, perfectly composed in a sharp navy blue suit, her copper-colored hair pulled into a flawless knot. She looked every bit the part, but Malcolm noticed a slight rigidity in her posture. The way her eyes flicked now and then toward her CFO, Anthony Giles, who lingered nearby like a restless shadow. Then, the documents were placed before her. She lifted her pen, paused, and in that hesitation, Malcolm found the courage he needed. He stepped forward, and the room fell silent. Once the room had cleared at her command, Malcolm stood alone across from Janelle, the polished conference table a cold barrier between them. Outside the glass doors, security guards remained stationed, alert and ready. The contract sat between them, still and signed. "You have 60 seconds, she said evenly. "Convince me not to have you arrested for crashing this meeting." Malcolm looked her straight in the eye. "Because you already feel something about this isn't right," he said calmly. "I saw it in your hesitation." He slid the stack of employee records across the table. 722 people. Not numbers. People with children, illnesses, mortgages. Everything Anthony showed you was dressed up. The cost-saving projections come entirely from wiping out your own workforce, while inflating executive payouts. Her eyes narrowed, suspicion rising. How would a janitor know that? Malcolm exhaled slowly. "Because before I scrubbed floors, I evaluated billion-dollar mergers at Halifax and Rowe. 3 years ago, I walked away from a deal just like this one." Janelle's expression shifted. Barely. She picked up the document and began scanning names. "Even if you're telling the truth," she said tightly. "The board has already given the green light. The papers are waiting for my signature." Malcolm didn't flinch. "Run the real numbers. Techfinity is overpriced by 30%. Their product pipeline is dried. I found internal R&D reports in your shred bin. They're selling you a shell, and your board knows it. Do you think he made the right call? Comment below and tell us where you're watching from." The color faded from Janelle's face. "That's a dangerous accusation." Malcolm nodded. "Yeah, and one I'm probably losing my job over." A long silence settled between them. Then, Janelle tapped the intercom. "Postpone the signing for 24 hours. Tell everyone it's a technical delay that no questions." She turned back to him. "Penthouse point 8 p.m. Bring me whatever proof you've got. If you're wasting my time, you won't work in this city again." Security escorted him out, but the moment weighed heavier than any reprimand that he already knew. His job was gone, no matter what happened next on the bus ride home. He called Ms. Holloway, asking if she could keep Kiera for a few more hours. She agreed, though her worried tone was harder to brush off. Back at his small apartment, Malcolm opened the storage bin she hadn't touched in years. Among dusty files and faded memories, he found his old laptop, still working. Barely he booted up the analysis tool she once used daily. 3 years had gone by, but muscle memory returned fast. BY7:30. He had gathered everything he needed, proof in charts, spreadsheets, hard data that he changed into the last decent clothes he owned, a white shirt and slightly loose navy trousers, then headed downtown. Her penthouse towered above the skyline, glass and steel glinting like judgment at the entrance. The guard phoned up to Malcolm's surprise. Janelle herself answered. "Send him up." As the elevator rose, he gripped his folder tighter, his thoughts spiraling. What if he was wrong? What if this was all for nothing? His analysis, his choice, his mental clarity in confronting one of the most influential figures in the city's corporate world. The elevator doors slid open directly into the penthouse. Malcolm stepped into a space that was both stunning and eerily sterile. That wall-to-wall windows displayed the glowing skyline of Westbridge, but the clean lines and sparse decor made it feel more like a high-end showroom than a lived-in home. Janelle stood near the glass, still in her work attire, a tumbler of amber liquid in her hand. "Right on time," she said, motioning to a nearby table where several monitors awaited. "Let's see what you've got." No small talk at NO Games. They dove straight into the data. Malcolm laid out his findings. The inconsistencies, the buried debt, the exaggerated forecast. As he walked her through the charts, he saw how quickly her mind worked. Probing, questioning, drawing connections with ruthless precision. 2 hours passed, intense collaboration. And for a while, Malcolm almost forgot about the enormous divide between their two lives. Almost. Have you ever felt worlds apart from someone but still deeply connected for a moment? Tell us where you're watching from. Your story matters too. Then, his phone rang. He glanced down. Ms. Holloway. Her voice came through, worried. "Kiera's fever's rising again. I thought you should know." Malcolm was already on his feet. "I have to go. My daughter's not well." Janelle looked up sharply, the executive mask slipping. "Is it serious?" He paused. "She's diabetic. Type 1. Her glucose has been unstable lately. I just need to get home." He gathered his things quickly, heading for the door, but before he reached the elevator, her voice stopped him. "Wait, let me take you." Before he could argue, she had already grabbed her coat and keys. They rode down together. The absurdity of it all struck him. The CEO of Carter Dynamics driving her Janitor, a crumbling apartment block, in her luxury SUV. The 20-minute ride was mostly silent, interrupted only by Malcolm's soft directions. When they pulled up, he saw the peeling paint, the dented mailboxes, the security door propped open with an old cinder block. The flush of embarrassment crept up his neck, but he crushed it quickly. This was his life, and he wouldn't apologize for it. "Thank you for the ride," he said curtly, reaching for the handle. But Janelle turned off the ignition and unbuckled her belt. "I'm coming in. If your daughter needs care, I want to help." The apartment was modest, but neat to the point of discipline. Every item in its place, every corner carefully maintained. The mark of a single parent doing his best with limited means. Ms. Holloway met them at the door, puzzled by the sight of Janelle following behind Malcolm. Before she could ask, a soft cry came from the back room. "Kiera." Malcolm rushed in, finding his daughter flushed, sweating, her glucose monitor blinking with numbers far too high. "We need to take her to the hospital," Malcolm said, his chest tightening, and not because of anything that had happened earlier that day. "I'll call an ambulance," Janelle offered, already reaching for her phone. But Malcolm shook his head. The calculation came instantly. "It always did. Ambulance deductible's $2,000. I'll drive her." He didn't mention his insurance had lapsed last month, or that this visit would bury him further in medical debt. He didn't have to. She saw it in the flicker of his eyes. "I'm driving," Janelle said firmly. "To Westbridge Memorial. Now." Her tone allowed no space for debate. Minutes later, they were flying through the city streets. Kiera wrapped in a blanket against Malcolm's chest. The hospital." Janelle spoke soft-light to the woman at the front desk. And just like that, they were led to a private room. Doctors arrived almost instantly. Malcolm sat beside his daughter, gripping her small hand while nurses and staff moved with quiet urgency around them. Janelle stayed nearby, a silent guardian, making calm calls in the corner. Have you ever witnessed someone step up when it mattered most? Drop a comment below and share where you're watching from. The hours blurred. Slowly, Kiera's condition stabilized, and just as dawn painted the city pink, she finally drifted into gentle sleep. In the corridor outside her room, Malcolm and Janelle sat in mismatched waiting chairs, faces drawn, eyes heavy with fatigue. A nurse offered them coffee. They accepted in silence. Then Malcolm asked the question that had been burning inside him all night. "Why did you help us?" Janelle stared into her paper cup, as if the answer were floating there. "Maybe I'm just tired of watching people make decisions without thinking about the people they hurt." Then she looked up, meeting his eyes. "Or maybe I just wanted to understand how someone ends up going from Wall Street pushing a janitor's cart." Her words lingered, an open door. Malcolm had buried that story deep. Since arriving in Westbridge, he had never told a soul. But something about tonight, about the raw, unfiltered truth they had both been forced to face made the walls inside him crack. "I used to be a rising star at Halifax and Row," he began softly. "Focused on tech mergers. 4 years ago, I was lead analyst in a massive acquisition, almost identical to your Techfinity deal. I uncovered red flags, fake projections, layoffs disguised as efficiency gains. When I reported it, my superiors told me to adjust the data, not the deal." He paused, rubbed his tired eyes. "I refused, but then my wife, Helena, was diagnosed with a rare cancer. I had a 6-year-old daughter and hospital bills stacking by the hour. So I gave in. I altered the numbers. The acquisition closed. Thousands lost their jobs. But I kept mine for 6 more months. They let me go just after Helena passed away. No severance, no health insurance, no future." A sharp bitterness leaked into his voice. "The world keeps turning, and people like us just get swept under it." Janelle didn't speak for a while. Then, softly, and still, knowing what it could cost you, "You stood up yesterday." Malcolm looked toward Kiera's hospital room. "Maybe I needed her to see that her dad could still choose what's right, even when it's not easy." The words came out unfiltered, more vulnerable than anything ever admitted in a balance sheet. Janelle nodded slowly. "I built my career in being tougher, faster, more relentless than anyone in the room. My father used to say feelings have no place in business." She paused. "But lately, I keep asking myself, what's the point? This empty penthouse, no life outside the boardroom. Making decisions that sparkle on paper but haunt me at 3 a.m. Morning sun spilled through the hospital window, catching the fatigue beneath her usually sharp expression. "I never see Malcolm reads in the stories I sign off on. Until now. Have you ever questioned the system only to realize you were part of it? Share your thoughts below. Your voice might inspire someone else." By the afternoon, Kiera had stabilized and not be discharged. Malcolm braced himself for the avalanche of hospital bills, but the nurse simply said, "It's been covered." Outside, Janelle's driver waited beside a sleek black sedan. "I have to return to the office," she said calmly, the boards melting down over the signing delay. She handed him a business card, her personal number handwritten on the back. "I want to keep talking about the Techfinity situation. In the meantime, take a few days off. Your job's not going anywhere." The professional mask had returned, but something beneath it was different. Malcolm took the card, torn between silent gratitude and a quiet sense of dignity. As she turned to leave, Kiera peered up at her with wide, curious eyes. "Will you visit us again?" she asked plainly. Janelle blinked, caught off guard. Then a warm, unmistakably real smile touched her lips. "I'd like that," she replied. And for the first time, her words didn't sound rehearsed. The days that followed felt like a fragile dream. Malcolm received confirmation from HR. Paid leave, no questions asked. Kiera bounced back quickly, her strength nothing short of remarkable. They spent quiet evenings playing games, reading bedtime stories, never quite saying aloud what they both feared. What would happen when life returned to normal? Then, 5 days after that night, everything fell apart. Malcolm was chopping vegetables when his phone buzzed. Breaking news. Carter Dynamics deal with Techfinity in jeopardy. Theo reconsiders acquisition. Seconds later, his phone rang again. "Janelle," her voice tight, urgent. "They're coming for you. Giles found out you accessed internal files. There's a police report, corporate theft, data breach. Stay put. I'm sending my attorney." But before the words could settle, a loud knock thundered against the door. 2 officers stood there, warrant in hand. They didn't wait for questions. They cuffed him. Malcolm caught a final glimpse. Kiera's terrified face. Ms. Holloway held her back. He forced himself to keep his voice steady. "It's okay, sweetheart. Call Miss Carter." The next few hours passed in a haze of holding cells and cold, windowless interrogation rooms. Malcolm responded to questions in a flat, measured voice, refusing to say more without legal counsel present. By nightfall, he sat alone in a sterile room, walls bare, clock ticking loudly above the door. Exhaustion warred with fear in the corners of his mind. What had he done? Who was he to challenge people with this kind of power? What would happen to Kiera if he went to prison? Then, the door opened, and to his shock, Janelle Carter stepped inside, followed by an older man in a tailored suit carrying a worn leather briefcase. "This is Mr. Hallberg," she said without ceremony. He's the best defense attorney in Westbridge. You're being released on bail that it's already been paid. Malcolm stared at her, his disbelief fighting against a fragile thread of hope. Why would you do this? Giles is your CFO. The board is your responsibility. Janelle's expression hardened. They lied to me. After we spoke, I had a private firm run a silent audit on Techfinity's books. Everything you said was true, and worse. Giles and Harlower taking Burbesto pushed the deal forward. As they walked toward the station exit, she slipped her coat around his shoulders. The gesture felt oddly personal amid the echo of fluorescent lights and scuffed linoleum floors. The board's trying to oust me, she added. Tomorrow's emergency shareholder meeting will decide everything for both of us. Have you ever felt like your whole future could shift in a single moment? Comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Outside, her driver waited with the same black sedan. She's at my place, Janelle said, sensing his next question. Kiera, that I thought she'd be more comfortably at the penthouse than with strangers in emergency care. The gesture landed hard. In the midst of scandal and sabotage, she had thought of his daughter as they drove through the city at night. Janelle explained what lay ahead. They're spinning Thisto paint you as bitter, a disgruntled ex-analyst with an axe to grind. They've already leaked your dismissal from Halifax and Rowito the press. Malcolm exhaled slowly, closing his eyes. And you? He asked. Where do you stand in all this? Her fingers tightened on the wheel. I have until morning to decide whether I sign the deal and keep my position, or fight the board and lose everything me father ever built. Silence stretched between them. The question neither dared to voice. Was integrity worth the cost? When they arrived at her building, Kiera ran into Malcolm's arms, sobbing with relief. Over her small shoulder, he looked at Janelle. Thank you, he mouthed. She gave a small nod and stepped away to give them space. Later that night, after Kiera had finally drifted to sleep in the guest room, Malcolm found Janelle on the balcony, gazing at the glittering skyline. She spoke without turning. I keep thinking about what you said in the hospital, about needing your daughter to know you could do the right thing, even when it's hard. She turned to face him. No one's ever seen me make that kind of choice before. My father always said, the right decision is the one that protects the company. The board only sees stock prices and quarterly gains. Malcolm stepped beside her, hands on the railing. And what do you believe? Janelle gave a humorless laugh. I think. I'm terrified of learning who I am without the title of CEO. The city stretched below them, and the morning came far too soon. Malcolm wore a borrowed suit to the emergency shareholder meeting, taking a quiet seat in the back row as Janelle Carter stood before the board and top investors. Anthony Giles went first, delivering a polished defense, complete with sleek slides predicting exponential growth and strategic synergy. Richard Hanley, chairman of the board, spoke next, lamenting internal breaches and disciplinary lapses, his gaze landing on Malcolm with thinly veiled disdain. Malcolm said nothing he didn't need to. Then it was Janelle's turn. She rose, adjusted her blazer, and walked to the podium, carrying nothing but a single sheet of paper. For the past 7 years, she began, I've given everything I have to this company. In that time, our valuation has tripled. Our team has grown by over 60%. But more than numbers, I've protected our reputation, especially our commitment to integrity. She paused, looking directly at Giles and Hanley. And that's why I can't in good conscience sign the current acquisition deal with Techfinity. A wave of murmurs swept through the room. The financial models presented here are fundamentally flawed, not just wrong, but engineered to deceive. The promised returns depend not on innovation or growth, but on mass layoffs and liquidation of assets. Then she laid out the proof, clear, compelling, delivered with the precision of someone who knew every number by heart. When she finished, she placed her sheet of paper on the podium, her resignation letter. If this board chooses to move forward with this deal, it will do so without my endorsement or participation. I will not build success in the suffering of our employees. She stepped away from the microphone as the room dissolved into chaos. Have you ever stood up for something that cost you everything? Tell us in the comments. And where you're watching from. Hours passed. There were votes, backroom negotiations, raised voices behind closed doors that by the end of the day, the outcome was clear. The deal was off, and so was Janelle. She would retain her board seat and a significant shareholding. but the CEO title would pass to someone else within 30 days. Malcolm, meanwhile, faced no charges, but there was no grand return to Carter dynamics either. Later that evening, as they exited the building together, both officially untethered, Janelle let out a rare, genuine laugh. "You know what's funny?" she said, glancing at him. "I feel lighter than I've felt in years." Malcolm smiled. He understood exactly. Freedom always came with a price, but it felt like freedom nonetheless. They wandered the city streets for a while. No clear destination, just two people suddenly free from the Rollisteeds spent their lives perfecting point 3 weeks later. Malcolm knelt in the small garden behind his apartment building, showing Kyra how to check the soil for their tomato plants. His phone rang. Janelle. Her daily call. Since the shareholder meeting, they had begun building something new. A socially responsible investment fund focused on companies with ethical labor practices. Malcolm's analytical mind and Janelle's network made an unexpectedly perfect team. Their first initiative, transforming a division of Techfinity into an employee-owned company, the same division that would have been gutted in the merger. "The funding's in," Janelle announced without preamble. "We can make the offer next week." Malcolm smiled, watching Kiera gently water the tiny garden beds behind their building. "That's 200 jobs saved," he said softly. "A solid beginning." Janelle's voice warmed. "Are you both still coming for dinner tonight? I finally tried that pasta recipe you mentioned." The casual nature of the invitation took Malcolm by surprise. How natural it had become. This intertwining of lives. How easily Janelle had made room for them in her world. And how much space they had found for her in theirs. "Wouldn't miss it," he replied. "Kiera's made you something, by the way, but she won't let me see it." His daughter grinned up at him, cheeks streaked with dirt, eyes gleaming with mischief. After hanging up, Malcolm returned to the soil, reflecting on how improbable this path had been, from janitor to defendant to partner. And now something else, something they hadn't yet named. There was time for that, time for everything. Have you ever found something better after losing what you thought was everything? Share your story and where you're watching from. That evening, Janelle's penthouse felt different. Warmer, less like a fortress, more like a home. Books lined shelves. A few houseplants lived near the windows, and a small toy truck sat forgotten beneath the coffee table. They celebrated with takeout spread across financial reports, laughing between bites and budget projections. Then Kiera presented her gift, a colorful drawing. 3 people, arms linked, standing in front of a garden bursting with giant tomatoes and a sun beaming down from above. "It's us," she said proudly. "You, me, and Daddy, and our garden, but bigger, 'cause it's going to grow." Janelle's eyes shimmered as she pulled the girl close. Over Kiera's head, her gaze found Malcolm's. The quiet connection passed between them, not of spreadsheets or survival, but of something more lasting. They were building something now, something neither had dared to hope for back in that tension-choked boardroom months earlier. 6 months later, life had found its rhythm. Phoenix Capital, the boutique investment firm they had founded, secured its first major clients. Malcolm's sharp mind had returned to full strength, shaped by experience, refined by failure, and reborn in purpose. Janelle had uncovered a whole new ability, reviving struggling companies without destroying the people inside them. Kiera thrived in her new school, her health stable, her smile wide. They had formed routines, inside jokes, traditions, weekend walks, favorite diners, lazy Sunday afternoons. They weren't a traditional family. But what they had built was real. It worked. It was honest. On a crisp autumn night, the 3 walked through Monarch Park after dinner with a new client. Kiera ran ahead, darting toward the silver sculpture that mirrored the city sky. For a moment, Malcolm and Janelle stood alone. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "The deal. Walking away from everything you built." Janelle watched Kiera's reflection bend and multiply across the sculpture's curves. Then she reached for his hand. "I didn't walk away from what mattered. I just finally figured out what was worth building." They stood side by side, watching Kiera giggled her funhouse reflection in the metal point. 2 people who had once lost everything, only to find that new beginnings often appear in the most unexpected moments. Like the day a janitor spoke up in a boardroom and altered the future not just for himself, but for hundreds of others with one simple act of courage. Because sometimes, the most meaningful deals aren't signed in ink. They're written in the heart, with bravery, with second chances, and with the family. Choose to grow with. If this story touched you, please subscribe to our channel and like this video for more healing, human stories that remind us what truly matters. And let us know in the comments, what would you risk everything for?